Come to Providence Place, owned by the Sisters of Providence for retirees looking for an ideal rental setting to continue their active, independent lifestyles. We offer bright 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, a magnificent chapel with daily mass, restaurant-style dining, wellness and entertainment programs, all with a friendly community spirit on beautiful grounds. Call for a tour, 413-534-9700.
Coming up on this Veterans Day edition of Reel to Reel.
The Diocese of Springfield puts the focus on the family. I'm Carolee McGrath. I'll have the story coming up.
I'm Steve Kiltonick here in New Haven, where an exhibit commemorating the 100th anniversary of the United States' involvement in the Great War is on display at the Knights of Columbus Museum.
And Dan Dumas with the latest news and brief from the Diocese of Springfield. These stories and more are just ahead on this edition of Reel to Reel. Hello and welcome to Reel on this Veterans Day weekend as we celebrate all the men and women who have served our country in the armed forces. Today we come to you from the Holyoke Soldiers Home, located just off Route 91 in Holyoke. Established in 1952, the Soldiers Home is a multifaceted health care facility available to veterans of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Its mission to provide care with honor and dignity in the best possible health care environment. We will talk with the superintendent here at the Soldiers Home coming up in just a few minutes, but first, the Diocese of Springfield put the focus on the family this week with 3 workshops featuring national Catholic speakers. Carolee McGrath attended the workshops that inspired catechists and other parish staff to reach out to families by living the light of Christ and walking with them, and by extending the invitation to come back to church.
By the way, that's called sarcasm?
Dr. Tim Hogan kept the crowd laughing at Our Lady of the Blessed Sacrament Parish in Westfield at the 2017 Catechetical Congress. He focused on bringing families back to church in his talk entitled The Gift of Cultural Hurricanes, Rebuilding Bridges That Transform Catholic Families.
When you listen to Pope Francis speak, or you just look out at the world, you realize that we are going through this incredible, unprecedented transformation of culture, something we haven't gone through in probably 300 or 400 years in Western civilization. So everything is getting deconstructed and reorganized. And what Pope Francis is saying, in the middle of this, we have to train our eye on the family.
Hogan, a Catholic psychologist, author, and lecturer, also spoke to pre-Cana instructors at the Bishop Marshall Center in Springfield. Hogan says parish leaders all across the country have to recognize how the family unit has changed.
Traditional families are not even the majority situation for young children to be growing up in right now. So the first thing we have to do is we have to embrace what shows up at the door as family. And that might be mom and the kids, that might be every other weekend mom and then dad and the kids, it might be various combinations, right, of step parents or married living together, having children coming to church. I mean, there's a whole lot of things, and it just requires a complete reboot of our computer of saying, how do we love well in this situation? How do we love this family well?
Hogan, a husband and father of 3, directs the Christian Grace Counseling Center in Detroit, working with couples and families. He says a major pitfall for folks is a jam-packed schedule and even sports, which interfere with Mass times.
There are solutions, and so like in Detroit, there are priests who go to the hockey arenas on Sunday morning and celebrate Mass because that's where all the families are.
According to CARA, which is a research arm of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, only 22% of the 67 million Catholics in this country attend Mass regularly. So the challenge is to go out and find the other 53 million and convince them that if they just show up on Sunday, not do anything special, but just show up, that Jesus will change their lives. Author and Catholic speaker Mike Patan, who is from Louisiana, also spoke at the workshop for catechists focusing on ministering to families. Patan calls himself a faith horticulturalist who plants seeds as he speaks to audiences all across the country.
I think people have to know you care. I think we have to keep inviting. One of the biggest things I've been saying the last year, I want to teach people how to invite people back home. I want to teach people what to say when people say I'm spiritual but not religious. I want to teach them how ordinary people have to say something, because I don't think it's going to be bishops or priests or nuns that help contribute to the decline of the Catholic Church. It's when ordinary people like you and I stop inviting people.
Gina Chervinsky is the Director of Catechetics and Youth Formation for the Diocese of Springfield.
If we're going to move things forward, we need to start with our families and start looking at family life today, and how we can be more effective with the things that we're doing and what we're offering for families and providing them the resources that they need, and to help our families know that we really do care about them. And I think if they really get a sense that the church has their well-being in heart, I think our families would be more receptive to what we're trying to teach them and offer them.
Several parishes participated, including Our Lady of Fatima in Ludlow.
You get the feeling that all of America, probably all of the world, is in the same situation. I blame everything on secularism. We're pushing Christianity out without even knowing it. So we're getting rid of Christ.
Helen Johnson teaches faith formation to 10th graders.
It's impossible to get discouraged if you truly believe in Christ, because you know that Christ always wins.
An encouraging message of truth that the church wants to share with families. Reporting for Reel to Reel, I'm Carolee McGrath.
Very important outreach. Thanks, Carolee. And as we set off the top of the program today, we are here at the Holyoke Soldiers Home, where for more than 60 years now, veterans from all branches of the service have been cared for in many different capacities, from something as simple as a dental appointment to full-time, long-term residential care. And joining me now is the superintendent of the Soldiers Home here, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Bennett Walsh. Lieutenant Colonel, thanks so much for having us here
Absolutely.
to celebrate veterans.
It's an honor to be on your show again.
So tell me, now, the Holyoke Soldiers Home sits high up on the hill in Holyoke, and for folks who don't know what you do all here, tell me some of the things that you do.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned in your comments, we are a long-term care facility, a nursing home specifically for veterans, and we can house, thankfully, 250 veterans on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And we can do everything here that a hospital does, minus major surgeries. We have a pharmacy, we have dentists, as you talked about, we have physical therapy. We also have an outpatient facility where folks can come in from veterans out in town and receive treatment from a doctor that is assigned to our Soldiers Home staff. But primarily we're dealing with long-term care, 24/7 care for our veterans in our community that we provide with a staff of over 350 caregivers here. And as you said, this is our 65th year, and we're very proud to be able to serve our veterans who so wonderfully served our country.
And I'm sure they all appreciate it. And speaking of veterans, this is Veterans Day weekend.
Yes, it is.
And how will they be marking it?
As we say here at the Soldiers Home, every day here is Veterans Day. We really embrace that. We have a bunch of events the entire month. On Sunday we had a horse carriage rides for our veterans we've never had in 65 years. Each day we're dedicating to a different genre, like a World War II Day, a Cold War Day. Today is Korean War Day, and tomorrow is Vietnam Veterans Day. And we also have our actual ceremony to honor all the veterans tomorrow with John Vilas as our keynote speaker. And we're honored to say that we also have our Governor Charles Baker, is coming on Friday night to say thanks to all our veterans, as we'll have a ceremony for him. A normal ceremony we're going to have anyway. We'll greet the veterans and the caregivers. And we have the Springfield Thunderbirds invite us to their Big Poppy Night, Military Appreciation Night, and we'll have veterans and caregivers there. But it's just, there's a lot of wonderful events also outside of the community that folks invite us to, and it's really it's humbling because we're honored to serve our veterans, and our community is so good to the veterans here at the Soldiers Home.
Well, they all deserve it, and thank you so much for your service, and thank you to all the veterans for their service, and we wish them all the best.
Thank you.
And still to come on Reel to Reel.
I'm Steve Kiltonick here in New Haven, where an exhibit commemorating the 100th anniversary of the United States involvement in the Great War is on display at the Knights of Columbus Museum.
And Dan Dumas with the latest news and brief from the Diocese of Springfield. These stories and more are still to come on Reel to Reel.
The Chalice of Salvation, your weekly spiritual connection. I'm Passion's Brother Terrence Scanlon, your Chalice host, inviting you to take time out of your busy days and join us Sunday morning at 10. We welcome Father Michael Lilpop from Saints Patrick and Rayfield Parish in Williamstown as our Mass presider and celebrate the 32nd Sunday and Veterans Weekend. The Chalice of Salvation, your spiritual connection, Sunday morning at 10, right here on TV 22 News.
Come to Providence Place, owned by the Sisters of Providence for retirees looking for an ideal rental setting to continue their active, independent lifestyles. We offer bright 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, a magnificent chapel with daily mass, restaurant-style dining, wellness and entertainment programs, all with a friendly community spirit on beautiful grounds. Call for a tour, 413-534-9700.
I'm Dan Dumas with your Reel to Reel news briefs. We begin with news out of the Vatican last week. On Thursday, Pope Francis announced that Pope John Paul I will be recognized by the Church as venerable, an important step towards canonization. You can read more about this at iobserve.org. In other news, students at Blessed Sacrament School in Holyoke got a jump start on Veterans Day with a special Mass held a week ago. Sharon Roulier was there and filed this report.
U.S. veterans representing service in every war and conflict since World War II were honored at the annual Mass. The Mass always presents an opportunity for the students from pre-K through grade 8 to receive a lesson in history.
We try to instill in the children how important it is to know what these men and women have done for us and for the freedoms that they're experiencing today and what the men and women are still continuing to do for them. It's very important that this lesson be an ongoing lesson for them.
God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Veterans were asked to stand in their pew while the middle school students sang the song corresponding to their branch.
Then it's high, hey, the army's on its way. Count up the king's son strong. For wherever we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to foreign shores, we sail at break of day. On we go.
Gracie Chesmore, a 5th grader at Blessed Sacrament, said one of her grandfathers served in the Navy and the other had served in the Army, and she currently has 2 cousins in the military.
I was taught as a young girl that if you see a veteran, you should say thank you for your service, and I just think it's important, and you should say it not just today, but every day.
And finally, it was an out-of-this-world conversation Pope Francis recently had with astronauts serving on the International Space Station.
Station, this is Isa PAO here in the Vatican. How can you hear me?
Jules, Isa PAO in the Vatican. This is Space Station. We hear you loud and clear.
Che cosa vi ha motivato a diventare astronauti? Che cosa maggiormente vi dà gioia nel tempo che passate nella stazione spaziale?
And Your Holiness, in my personal opinion, what gives me the greatest joy every day is being able to look outside and see God's creation, maybe a little bit from his perspective. People cannot come up here and see the indescribable beauty of our earth and not be touched in their souls.
Okay, this concludes
Thank you to Pope Francis and all participants. Station, we are now resuming normal operational communication.
Remember, you can always stay informed on all the latest news in the Catholic Church locally and beyond by logging on to iobserve.org. There you can read articles written by our Catholic communication staff, as well as view archived episodes of Reel to Reel. That's iobserve.org. I'm Dan Dumas, and those were your Reel to Reel News Briefs.
Miles Teller and Judi Dench turn in two terrific performances, and a musical that was not a hit in 1987 now comes to the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut, and is a hit. Let's take a look at this week's Real Culture.
Hear that music, listen that line, they're covered with words we can't read. Look there, David, that bright.
Now playing at the Goodspeed Opera House is the musical Rags. This is a story of a young mother who comes to America with her young son, trying to build a new life. Director Rob Ruggiero has done a fine job with the cast and the pacing of the show. The problem is the book of this musical. It's overstuffed with too many stories and not enough focus on our main subject. But the men and the ladies of the chorus sing and dance their hearts out. The costumes are perfect, and so is the set. But at times, I've found the revolving set did get in the way. Rags is not a great musical, but the company pulls it together for a ride you will not forget. It's there till December the 12th.
And girls like me.
And now for a film you must see. It's called Thank You for Your Service. This is an important film based on a true story of the scars of war, the struggle to reconnect, and what families do to make it through each day. Miles Teller is outstanding as a young man coming to grips of what war has done to him and his friends. Gripping and hard to watch, but a true must-see.
I'm alive because of you. I know this don't look like much of a life, but every morning I get up, I'm grateful. I'm grateful I'm alive.
I haven't been as happy as this for years.
Also in theaters, Victoria and Abdul. Judi Dench is a great actress. No matter the role, big or small, she always shines. In this new film, once again, she plays Queen Victoria. But this time she meets someone who will change her life forever. His name is Abdul, and he is an Indian man sent to help her plan her golden jubilee. But what happens is a bond. Many people do not understand the bond, but the movie really belongs to Judi Dench from the first moment. At times it may be a little boring, but in the end, Oscar time again for Judi. So if you're looking for a classy-looking film with great performances, look no further.
What is the point?
Service.
Service.
I think we are not here to worry about ourselves. We are here for a greater purpose.
And you can see my reviews, as well as read other movie reviews, provided by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops online at iobserve.org. That's iobserve.org. And playing at the Majestic Theater in West Springfield is Beth Henley's Pulitzer Prize-winning play, Crimes of the Heart, and it'll be playing there till December. Also, it's award season. That means all the big films will be opening, and I'll be there to give you all those reviews. I'm Mark Giza for Real Culture. Have a fabulous weekend.
For most of us, World War I is something relegated to the history books, but there's no denying that its impact was felt for generations. At the Knights of Columbus Museum in New Haven, the Great War comes alive at a special exhibit that showcases not only the war itself, but the Knights' involvement in the war relief effort, as well as its fundraising drives and hospitality centers. Steve Kiltonick spent an afternoon touring the exhibit and has this story.
World War I was the world's first international conflict. It's the first war where planes, tanks, machine guns, and poison gas were used in deadly fashion. It's estimated that during the Great War, from 1914 until 1918, 11 million soldiers died, while civilian casualties exceeded 20 million. After the war ended, the map of Europe was completely redrawn.
Over there, send the word, over there.
President Woodrow Wilson formally entered America into the war on April 6, 1917. By Armistice Day, November 18, 1918, 116,000 Americans gave their lives in the bloody conflict. Of these, 1,600 belonged to the Knights of Columbus. Lieutenant William Fitzsimmons, a Knight, was the first American officer to die in the war, killed during a German air raid. 2017 marks the 100th anniversary of the U.S. participation in the so-called War to End All Wars. To commemorate the event, the Knights of Columbus Museum has unveiled an exhibit entitled World War I Beyond the Front Lines. The exhibition gives an historical retrospective of the war, along with interactives, images, and artifacts from the KFC Museum, Supreme Council, and Multimedia Archives, as well as borrowed materials from private lenders and organizations, such as the National World War I Museum. On display, you'll find helmets and caps from both sides, as well as replicas of uniforms, which visitors can even try on. The exhibit includes various war-related items, like these Trent's binoculars, buttons, and pins. Bethany Sheffer, the curator of the museum, walked us through the three main galleries of the exhibit. The first focuses on the origins of the war, the second puts visitors in the war, and the third explains the Knights' involvement as a war relief agency. James Flaherty was the Supreme Knight at the beginning of America's involvement in the war. He developed a War Activities Committee, chaired by Colonel P.H. Callahan, that initially was the official fundraiser for all Catholic organizations in America. But the Knights first needed to get approval from General George Pershing, Supreme Commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, before they could help in the war effort.
He was very animate about making sure there was no duplication of services. So he wanted the Knights to work with other organizations, so they did convince him with the YMCA, as well as I believe it's the Red Cross, that they all got together and talked about what they could all do. And based on that, the Pershing said, yes, all right, you can serve here.
During the war, colorful posters were used by Knights to advertise their large-scale fundraising effort to support their services. The drive was hugely successful, raising ultimately $14 million.
All of the proceeds went towards funding the recreation centers, which we call huts.
The huts became the focal point for the Knight war relief activities throughout the war. Vivian Lee Solik is the archivist for the museum.
Their slogan was everybody welcome, everything free. Everything the Knights did, all that they gave away, the candy, the gum, the cigarettes, the coffee, tea, hot chocolate, all of that was given freely to men in uniform.
At the huts, soldiers could get a brief respite from the horrors of war, regardless of race or religion.
The soldiers knew when their day was done, they could come into the Knights of Columbus hut, relax, write a letter home, perhaps gather around the piano or the gramophone and sing a popular song of the day. So it really gave them a place to relax for just a minute and forget what was going on in the world.
The huts were simple structures that were built on military bases in the U.S., like this one at Camp Zachary Taylor. Overseas, the Knights opened huts primarily in existing buildings.
It would have a library of some sort where they would have newspapers, magazines, popular reading of the period, as well as books.
In addition, the Knights also manufactured Bibles and other religious materials.
We also produce little miniature books that are approximately 2 inches by 2 inches. They are serializations of popular stories of the day. They could take them, put them in their packs. When they're done, they trade it with their buddies. So the miniature books were very popular with the soldiers.
For the 100,000 Catholic U.S. servicemen who were Knights, the huts were used for celebrating Mass and receiving the sacraments like confession. On display is a chaplain's mass kit that would have been used in the hut. Here, soldiers could also watch theater productions and attend dances.
One of the things that the Knights actually provided was stationery so that you could write to home, and we have a few in our collection.
Athletics were also an integral part of recreational activities.
They had teams, and they would distribute baseball bats and gloves aboard the ships as well as within the Army, and would host boxing matches, so they distributed boxing gloves as well. And they actually taught classes too, because boxing at that time was incredibly popular.
A Hall of Fame baseball player was also on night.
We also had some very famous baseball players of the day who were knights. Johnny Evers of the Evers to Tinker to Chance, the double play. He was a secretary and toured Europe promoting baseball, teaching people how to umpire the game.
The huts were run by KFC secretaries, nicknamed Casey's. They wore uniforms exactly the same as those in the Army, except with a KC logo. The Knights built mobile food trucks to distribute food.
They actually had a rolling kitchen. They had one version is an actual truck that just drives along. The other is an actual roller kitchen which attaches to a vehicle, and you can cook things with it too. They would also go close to the front too and provide things like chocolate and tobacco to troops as they go by. So they weren't just in the huts as well. They went into the hospitals to provide comfort for those who were wounded.
In the huts, the KFC chaplains provided spiritual support. Many, including Father John Duval, the angel of the trenches, risked their lives. The exhibit features Father Duval's war items, including medals, helmet, and tunic. He never recovered from exposure to mustard gas and died shortly after the war. Chicopee native and First Lieutenant William Davitt was a knight, chaplain, and pastor of St. Anne's in Lenox. He volunteered to serve with the 125th Infantry. Davitt received an American Service Medal and French Croix de Guerre for leading a rescue squad that saved the lives of 40 soldiers trapped under enemy fire. Father Davitt was killed by shrapnel from an explosion just over an hour before the armistice went into effect. He is recognized as the last officer killed in World War I. The Davitt Bridge and VFW Post 625 in Chicopee are named in his honor. Here, his original citation and French medal can be found. One of the major attractions here at the exhibit is the actual recreation of a trench, where visitors can actually get a sense and feel of what it must have been like to fight from one of these trenches. It comes complete with machine guns firing, bombs exploding, and planes in dogfighting. And you can even see the enemy on the other side through this periscope.
Our trench is amazing compared to what a real trench would have looked like. It's much bigger so that more people can utilize it, but a real trench would have been maybe 2 feet. The walking space would have been about 2 feet.
After the war, the Knights remained in Europe as long as soldiers were there. At a German hut, 40,000 donuts a day were made by the night bakers for the hungry troops. Once the doughboys came home, they provided recruitment agencies and services to help vets find employment. The Knights' involvement in the war ended in 1921. By then, they had rightfully earned the respect of the veterans and country with their message of charity, care, and Christ. The World War I exhibit will be open through December 30th, 2018. A series of war-related lectures and presentations will also be offered. You can find more information on the World War I exhibit through a link on iobserve.org. For Reel to Reel, I'm Steve Kiltonic.
If you're planning to visit the World War I exhibit or any other Knights of Columbus event, the museum is open daily, 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. There are permanent collections on display, as well as admission and parking are always free. And for this week, that's Reel to Reel. Thanks so much for joining us today. For updates anytime, you can find information and news on the Catholic Church, both here in the Diocese of Springfield and around the world, on our news and information site, iobserve.org. And also be sure to friend us on Facebook. That's Catholic Communications on Facebook. Like us and follow us today. I will be back at the same time next week for another edition of Reel to Reel, your window on the world around you. See you then.
Reel to Reel is a production of the Catholic Communications Corporation, funded in part by the annual Catholic Appeal, and the support of you, our faithful viewers.